Good morning to all of you in the cathedral here and to all of you who are joining us virtually today. It's a wonderful day to be in the cathedral. It's a wonderful day to be alive. Look outside and see the sunshine. So this fellow walks into a pub in Ireland, in Dublin, and he goes up to the bartender and says, "Give me 3 beers." So the bartender gives him 3 beers, draws them out, and he takes the 3 beers and goes over into a corner and he drinks each of them. He drinks one a little out of this one, and a little out of the next one, a little out of the next one. And when he finishes all 3, he comes back and he orders 3 more. And the bartender says, "Laddie," he says, "these beers go flat mighty quickly once they're drawn. Wouldn't it be better if you just ordered 1 beer at a time?" And he said, "Oh, no, there are 3 brothers in my family. One of them is now moved to Australia and one is moved to America. And before they left, we all got together and we decided that when we drank, we would drink like this. All 3 of us would drink 3 beers at a time to remember the days when we could drink together." The bartender said, "Well, that sounds like a nice practice," so he didn't think anything of it. So every night, this fellow would come in. He was a regular. And everybody noticed when he came in because he would order 3 beers. He'd go back to the back corner, drink 3 beers, come up and get a second round. But one night, he walked in, and he only ordered 2. And everybody gasped. And he sat down, and he drank the 2 beers. And when he came back, the bartender said, "I don't mean to intrude upon your grief, but all of us here wish to express our condolences for this great loss in your family." And the fellow looked at him kind of confused, and then he realized what the assumption that was being made. He said, "Oh, no, all 3 brothers are fine. It's just that I've given up beer for Lent." I've been thinking a lot about giving up things over the last several weeks. In fact, I've been thinking a lot about dying. 3 weeks ago, from here in the pulpit, I shared with you a bit about my hometown, Askew, North Carolina, a small town in rural, largely agricultural northeastern North Carolina, one of 4 contiguous counties, predominantly African American. I shared almost in passing that I graduated from a high school that was a little over 2/3 black, but that's about all I said about it. Today I'd like to tell you a little more about that very special high school. In 1969, the federal government decided that all of their efforts up to this point to integrate the schools had pretty much failed. You may recall freedom of choice. It just didn't work. And so they decided they were going to put their foot down and they were going to force the issue. In my home county, it was decided that 2 black high schools would merge with 1 white school to form a new Askew High School. Prior efforts to integrate our schools in surrounding counties had all resulted in quite a bit of tension, sometimes even violence. But for the most part, it resulted in the exodus of a lot of white students into hastily formed private so-called Christian schools. And a lot of folks in my home county feared that that same thing was going to happen, and that all of this trauma that we were going to go through by integrating these 2 black schools and 1 white school was going to be for naught. In an effort to build some kind of school unity, the school leadership did a really smart thing. They created a transition committee made up of 12 students. The class presidents in each of the 3 schools came together to form a transition committee. And it was that group that was charged with picking the school colors, which were red and gold, picking the school mascot, the Mighty Cougars, and most importantly, drafting the student government constitution. We came up with an innovative idea on that committee of students, an innovation in democratic politics and governance. we decided that in the student body race and in the race for class president in each of the classes, whoever got the most votes would be the president. Whoever got the most votes of the opposite race would be the vice president. It was my first exposure, though I didn't have the language for it at the time, to the difference between equality and equity. If we had created a governing document that gave everyone only equal votes, there would rarely have been, if ever, a white kid elected to any student government office because of the way things were. But by making that single accommodation, we gave everybody a seat at the table. At the same time, there was another subplot going on related to athletics. Do you remember that movie, Remember the Titans? What a great movie. That was our story too. The big question was who was going to be the new head football coach and who was going to select who got to be on the teams. All three schools had great, rich athletic traditions and some great athletes and some great coaches, and the big question was how is this going to all work? Just before the end of the school year, right before the year before we were integrating, the announcement was made that Al Vaughn, the coach of the white school, would be the head football coach. And everyone held their breath, wondering if the black players and the black coaches would accept this decision. As the summer began, we learned that the student body president at one of the black schools had come down with a serious kidney disease and would require dialysis. The problem was that our little hospital in Ahoskie didn't have a dialysis machine. The closest one was over an hour away in Norfolk, Virginia. His situation was dire. So a small group of students, black and white, came together and they started a project they called Operation Hope in hopes of raising a little bit of money just to help the kid out. They thought maybe, just maybe, if we do something, even though our goals are modest, maybe it'll help ease some of the tension in the air. The summer of 1970 was a hot one, and on August 9th, tryout for the football team started. At the opening meeting, Coach Al Vaughn told us he would not cut any of us. If we didn't make the team, it would be because we cut ourselves. And after the meeting, 93 ball players lined up on the west end goal line and ran 100-yard dashes for almost 2 hours. Within 3 days, 63 boys, white and black, had left the team. It was going to be a long season. Finally, the big day arrived. School opened in late August. Racial tension was in the air. But all that groundwork that had been laid the year before began to start paying off. With the 30 remaining football players plus 2 that we had called up from the JV team, we won our first football game of the season. Student government elections took place, and the system worked exactly the way it was designed. White and black students were engaged. The Cougars won their second game. Operation Hope really took off as people started to understand the stakes in the game, and the football team kept winning. Students from all 3 schools embraced their new mascot and their new school colors. And the football team, well, we lost a couple of non-conference games to schools that were much larger than us, but we kept fighting. Something else was happening too. The brightest students in the new school were tapped into a reconstituted beta club. That was our version of the National Honor Society. And academic excellence began to emerge as a point of pride for the school too. As the fall progressed, people started to think, maybe, just maybe, this experiment is going to work. The football team made it to the playoffs, and despite having only 32 players, we beat 4 consecutive undefeated teams, and on a cold Friday night in November, we hoisted the state championship trophy above our heads for everybody in Hertford County to see. Everybody, black and white, had participated. They said it couldn't be done. We took exams and left for Christmas break, and the whole town exhaled. One semester down. When we returned for spring semester, things picked up right where they left off. The basketball team won the district championship. Operation Hope, you remember them? They not only raised a little money to help out a poor kid, they raised enough money to buy a kidney dialysis machine for the hospital. The Beta Club was selected as the best club in the state. And the new Askew High School produced its first valedictorian, a young black man who earned a perfect score on the SAT and went to Yale on a full ride. His story was interesting. When he got his SAT score back, he scored a 1599. He went to our math teacher, Ms. Sessoms, and said, "Ms. Sessoms, there's been a mistake made. I didn't miss any." And she said, "But a 1599, for goodness sake. I mean, it's a great score." He said, "No, ma'am, I didn't miss any." And she said, "Well, maybe you just colored in the bubble wrong." And he said, "No, ma'am, I didn't. I didn't miss any. And it's not fair." So Miss Sessoms got on the phone, and she figured out whoever ran the SAT, the college board or whatever, and she got them to pull his test and pull the question that they claimed he missed. And he proved that there were two right answers to that question. And they had to rescore his test, and countless others all over the country. What a way to end a first year together. Success led to success, and in my senior year, the second year of our new school, the football team moved up to AAA, and we went 11-1. The student government constitution withstood its first test in the summer of 1971 when the black student who'd been elected student body president, a really gifted art student, decided to skip his senior year. And a skinny white kid named Askew, who was the vice president, became student body president. And everybody held their breath, especially me. But it wasn't all wonderful. As the second year of our new school progressed, we white students got to know some of our black classmates in a deeper, more substantive way, and they began to share some of their stories, often painful stories that opened our eyes to a world we never knew. Constance, not her real name, was an African-American classmate of mine who hated my girlfriend, Susan, also not her real name. I couldn't figure it out because Constance hardly knew Susan at all. Yet, for some reason, she seemed to just loathe her. And I grew tired of the constant cuts and taunts, and I finally confronted Constance one day, and I said, "Why do you hate my girlfriend so much?" And she told me her story. I don't know about you, but in my schools, when you got your textbook, you wrote your name in the back, the inside of the back cover. So when you got your textbook, you knew who had had your book the year before. And when Constance got her science book in the 8th grade, she opened it and found that Susan had had her book the year before. What I didn't mention was that Susan was a year younger than me and in a class behind me. So Constance got a science book that had been thrown away by the white school and was 2 years late in arriving. And so she didn't really hate Susan so much as she hated the system that Susan represented in her mind. Hers was a world I couldn't imagine. I couldn't understand. I couldn't even imagine how angry I would have been if that had happened to me. But the story didn't end there for Constance. At the end of our senior year, despite a system that had done everything it could to hold her back, Constance became the valedictorian of our class and attended Duke University on a full scholarship. The The salutatorian of our class was also a black woman who attended Wellesley on a full ride. Can you imagine a small, rural, fully integrated school out in the middle of the coastal plains of North Carolina was sending its graduates, white and black, to some of the best universities in the world? They said it couldn't be done, but Askew High School had defied all odds, and a new thing was born. But in order for that new thing to be born, some things had to die. A system that segregated white students from black students, giving white students the clear advantage, it had to die. A system that dismissed black students' academic potential, it had to die. A system that feared what might happen if black boys sat beside white girls in class, it had to die. A system that underestimated both black kids and white kids' ability to rise above the stereotypes they had both been taught about the other. It too had to die. Jesus said, "Verily, very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." Our world is changing. For some, it has become a frightening place as they contemplate the ways that things are becoming different. But our Lord tells us we need not fear. Ours is an Easter story. We are Easter people. Jesus dies, but it doesn't end there. God is always at work, even in the things that appear to die, even in the things we have to be willing to give up. In 2021, as we end this season of Lent and prepare ourselves for Easter, perhaps we should ask ourselves, what new thing do we hope for? And more importantly, what must die within us? What must we be willing to give up to allow this new thing to be born? Amen.